house arrest, they had a lot of restriction, imprisonment, and these things. But in the second period, they have the Shi'ite dynasty. It's some kind of freedom for them. After that, they start to think and revise their political theory. Should we wait until the end of the world for the Imam that's appeared? Or we can have our rulers. Not, for example, infallible rulers, but just ruler. Not just ruler, okay ruler. See, we have a spectrum. And they reach that okay ruler is good. We do not need a perfect ruler. I think some pragmatistic viewpoint happened on that time. And in the third period, the power of the jurist was above the power of the king. After that, the theory of the guardianship of the jurist happened. As you see, all of these theories were some reflection to the reality. I think it's not the essence of Sharia, it's not the essence of jurisprudence, it's the reflection or understanding of the jurist related to the reality. So those who believe, and it's interesting, some of these figures mentioned that my theory is necessary to Sharia. In the time of constitutional movement, the opposition, both parties said that is anti-constitutionalism, believe that this theory, dictatorship, is essential to Sharia. Those believe in democracy also said this is essential to Sharia. What I say, none of them are essential to Sharia. Politics is something rational, pragmatic. It's out of religion. We do not need to find any political solution in the domain of religion. It's something I understand from these challenges that happened about 1 century ago. But also, to be honest, 3 decades ago, when I was young, I did not have this idea that I had. I also read these spectrums. After that, I ask myself, which of them is more religious? Which of them is more attentive? I reached this point that the jurist should get this point. Politics is not something that could be isolated from the time. If it's the fruit of the time, it could not be religious. We can find only some general values in religion, such as justice. Because of it, I wrote justice is the main point. But the style of the regime, or the state, or the governance is rational. It's not religious. Not Shiite, not Sunni, not Islamic, not any religion at all. It's the point.
Two questions, if I may. One is about how, okay, so the hadith that Sunni jurists emphasize, my community will never agree upon an error. Okay, how does Shia theorizing on that hadith fit into this question of you're projecting towards greater emphasis upon democracy and the rights of citizens within the political sphere, and yet within Shiism there's this sort of ambiguity towards the hadith, or the concept of my community will never agree upon an error. So how does that fit in? And what about the concept of the occultation of the imam? What function does that fulfill vis-a-vis this idea of God's justice, vis-a-vis the role of the fuqaha?
Two good questions. The first one, it was said that Prophet Muhammad said, "La tajtamu ummati ala al-khata." That the translation, English translation of it, it means my community does not rather two mistakes and error. It means the community, ummah, is sinless or errorless, mistakeless. It does not make the mistake when they have consensus. This hadith is the foundation of ijma, consensus. That is the source of Sharia. And after a deep research, this hadith could not be attributed to Prophet. He did not say it, and I'm sure about it. This hadith also in Sunni tradition is not hadith. It means that we cannot rely on it. It was made. It was a fake hadith that when they wanted to have some sources for consensus, and they should have something from the Quran or from the tradition, they did not find anything in the Quran. They said, it should have something in the tradition. Also, they did not find anything in tradition. It was made. And no one said, when Prophet said this, he did not say, because if he said this, it means that, so does it mean that in every time that we have a consensus, it's the source the same as the Quran? Is the source of Sharia the same as tradition? No. Practically, yes, but theoretically, there is no foundation or attempted foundation for it. It's about the second, occultation. As I mentioned briefly, the time of the last imams, they were under imprisonment, under house arrest, under restrictions. The story of Mahdi, the last imams of Shiites, is something like the story of Moses in the time of Pharaoh. He wanted to kill him when he was a child. And according to the Shiites, traditional Shiites, they believe it's a miracle that it was hidden from the Pharaoh of his time, means the unjust ruler, Abbasid ruler of his time. And by occultation, he was protected and preserved for guiding, but his guidance is a spiritual guidance. So they believe that all of these guidances that we have, its source, it's because of him, according to traditional Shiite viewpoint. So it's only this thing, a spiritual guidance. It's his function in the time of occultation.
I'm really fascinated by the deep roots for democracy, and I'm puzzled by where you locate those roots. If this hadith is not a possible source then, and I'm more familiar with the Western tradition, the Christian tradition, where there's a connection between the Reformation, where there's a realization that personal conscience matters a great deal, and so one of the things that democracy is doing is empowering personal conscience. And so I can see in a Christian tradition where you might see a connection between democracy and Christianity. Where does democracy come from then in Shiite Islam?
Good question. Democracy, the background and the root of democracy is some kind of rationalism. Reason. What is your understanding of reason in this religion or that sect? Because modernization is based on some kind of rationality. Democracy also is based on acknowledgement of the reason. And as I mentioned, reason has a very important role in Shiite Islam. It's interesting that most of or many of the Muslim philosophers were Shiite. Famous Al-Farabi, Avicenna, Mullah Sadran, many of them were Shiite. And also, in the challenge between rational Muslims and anti-rational Muslims, in Sunni domain, the domination was for anti-rationalism, Ash'ari. We have the same challenge among Shia Muslims, between Usulis and Akhbaris. Usulis were rationalists, Akhbaris were the people of Hadith, people of tradition. In Shi'ite seminaries, the domination and the victory was for the rationalists, Usulis, not for the people of Hadith. And these theories that I made, you cannot find any of them among Sunni jurists. Search. I told you, Maududi was not a jurist. And the problem is, these fundamentalism among Sunni jurists, among Sunni Muslims, is because of the lack of some intellectual jurists. We have this problem. I travel to many countries, for example, Pakistan. What's the problem there? One of the problems is they do not have these jurists. Because of it, they cannot modernize. It's not the only problem, it's not the only thing, but we have the other thing. So the ability of Shiism, Shia Islam, for modernity is more than Sunni Islam. For those who are familiar with the tradition of Islam, in Sunni Islam, we have a very nice expression in the name of the goal of Sharia, the aim of Sharia, maqasid al-Sharia in Arabic. Maqasid al-Sharia means we should not keep ourselves on the surface or superficial understanding of the text. We should go beyond it. And what's the beyond? The goal of Sharia. What's the goal of Sharia? Justice, freedom, reason. It's some kind of Mu'tazilite. And it means that also the new generation of Sunni scholars return to some kind of rationalist Mu'tazilite approach. And it's Shiite approach. Because of it, when you have reason, and reason as a fourth source of Sharia. The first source is the Quran. The second source is tradition of Prophet. The third source is consensus, al-ijma'. The fourth source for Shiite is reason, al-aql. For Sunni Muslims, they're in different schools, is analogy, qiyas, or its sisters. It has a lot of sisters also, this thing. But if you acknowledge reason, after that you interrogate that modernity, democracy, secularism are able to come. And for the time of constitutional movement, we have this time, we have this opportunity, rationalizing the politics. You can compare two, for example, a scholar from each century of Sunni and Shia Jews and reach the same point about the ability of modernization. Henry Corbin is a scholar of French scholar and the best scholar in Iranian mysticism, especially on Suhrawardi and Mohsen. He was a Heideggerian. He was a student of Heidegger school, and after that he shifted to Iranian mysticism, and he was the best. He wrote a book in 4 volumes on Iranian Islam, and in his book mentioned the summary of this book is this: philosophy and mysticism are essential to Shiism. Philosophy and mysticism. I focus on philosophy. If you have this ability of philosophy, it means you have the ability of modernization, democratization, secularization, and all of these modern terms. This is a summary of these two. Yes.
I'll be interested to hear your views on the evolution of Fari in Iran beyond the current Fari. And if it's going to evolve beyond the current value of Fari, and we're going to get into a new period, how would it present itself?
if there is freedom, we have a free election, and also the supporter or the followers of this theory, official theory, comes to competition, real competition, I think is the best thing for Iran. What I'm telling you here is maybe my expectation that if we have this kind of freedom, after that we can say, oh, we have only, for example, 30% of the voters, not more. If you had more than this, you do not need military, you do not need army, you do not need intelligence service, you do not need this force. It means that you are less than 50%. It's my understanding, but we need something more in future. I hope and I think the future of Iran is so clear because of these points that I made. And if you compare what happened in Syria, in Egypt, in all these uprising Arab countries, there is something that, for example, 1970, the revolution of Iran happened 54 years ago. The incomplete revolution of Egypt happened 2 years ago. And you know, they reached the military coup. It's the difference. We didn't have this coup in Iran. Also, we have other problems that we do not have this problem, this kind of problem. So it's good to compare these Middle Eastern countries, Arab uprising countries, and Iran, and also, for example, what happened in Syria, that is a massacre, so we have a lot of problems, and also what we have in Iran. I think the future of Iran compared to some better than, some much better than what we have now. Yes?
But I think we're kind of mixing the two here because an uprising in Iran means that we're kind of going away from the religious Supreme Court kind of rule. But with Eastern countries, we're not talking religion here. We're talking more of political freedoms. The rulers are never talking politics or religion. They're not claiming that they have this power from God. So it's kind of two realms that we're mixing in these two cases. I think Iran would be more a revolution away from what the Iranian regime called religion is, but in the Arab countries it's more of political uprisings, away from it. You know, it's not religious kind of.
If you go to Egypt, for example, and if you know the power, Muslim power groups, not only in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Libya, in Syria, in many of these countries, so they highlight more religious affairs. On the other hand, we have, for example, the commander of the army in Egypt that he is something else. And no, Mohammed Morsi in the jail, and maybe you saw his show 2 days ago, and we can hear that they have this problem also in Egypt. It means that we should find the best way of reconciliation of Sharia and democracy. It's the problem of Muslim majority countries, Iran, Egypt, Tunisia, other countries. Also, yes, they are different. I believe that they have some differences. But if you do not, for example, one question, there was a whole research, academic research in 2013, end of 2013. Most of the Muslims in more than 30 countries, according to this research, said, we are against violence, we are against terrorism, and at the same time, most of them said, we believe in implementation of Sharia. At the same time. So, if you ask ourselves, in their mind, is there any reconciliation between these two? It means that we should try to have a better understanding of reality in our countries, all these countries. So the best country, I think, in this Arab uprising country is Tunisia. And the rate of occupation, education, women freedom, and the other things is very close to Iran. you know, the situation of this uprising also is better in Tunisia than Egypt, than Libya. Why? There is more open-minded person among the Islamists in Tunisia. We do not find this kind of open-minded in Libya because of dictatorship of Gaddafi, or in Egypt, unfortunately. So I think the style of Tunisia and the style of future of Iran, not Iran in this present time, is the best style for the Muslims. Also, we have good styles in Indonesia, Malaysia, and it's not corrupt countries. Also, there are democratic countries in this time, especially Indonesia. It's another style that we can look at them and learn something from them. Yes?
I don't know, but you somehow missed Turkey. Yeah, and
You're right.
for somehow I think it has maybe the highest status right now. And Huntington in his book, Clash of Civilization, focused on Turkey as one of those countries that can be nuclear for the Arab Islamic, he as a leader for the Arab Islamic countries around in the region, the Middle East. And I don't know, but there's been trials in Turkey since before the 70s for an Islamic government. And they ended now with the government of Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And I think also that what affects what happens in the Middle East depends on the status of the country, away from the belief of the people. For example, in Egypt, what most of the people think in the Middle East, that it's mostly affected by the fact that Egypt is a neighbor to Israel, and it has Suez Canal, and it's that central position where a big percentage of the world trade passes from, and this influences also being close to Saudi Arabia and the relation with Saudi Arabia. It's not only that the style or the philosophy of governments among the Brotherhood or other people or other thoughts is only influential in that. I think that those facts really affecting what's going on. And for example, the United States decided on continuing of giving Egypt the annual aid, despite the fact that what happened with is a military coup that is affected by the neighborhood of Israel and the Suez Canal security and other issues.
Thank you. I agree with you about the case of Turkey. Yes, I forgot. And Turkey is one of the best examples for the conciliation of Islam and democracy. It means that also Turkey's experience is a reflection to French style of secularism. And after that, as you know, the Islamic parties arise, and for several times also they were restricted by the armies that know they have power. And they try to show a better viewpoint of reconciliation of Islam and democracy. And I think it's one of the most successful case in the world. We can compare the case of Turkey with the case of Indonesia, the case of Tunisia, and I hope in the future the case of Iran. So Turkey is one of the first fair, for democratic Islamic countries. Also, it has a lot of difficulty. In this time, Recep Tayyip Erdogan has a lot of difficulty in transcription and other things. But I hope he solves these problems, and we can have this model for the other Muslims. And it's interesting. all of these persons also, they call themselves Islamists, that there is nothing about terror or violence, and they reach their goals through democracy and peace ways. So completely agree with you. Thank you for your time. Yes.
Thank you very much for your talk. Within Shia Islam, within the body of college, is there a clear theory of crisis?
Which crisis?
Good question. Political crisis is for me the easy answer. That figures who agree, while we may disagree on conceptions of political justice or just rule, we may agree on crisis. Economic, political, social, cultural, not merely something.
I think when you have a famous statement, Islamic regime does not have any crisis. It means that supreme leader is able to solve all crises and problems. And they think that they are able to do it. But to be honest, no, I did not make any theory. And also these theories that I made also were so simple, and they need more complex understanding of politics. Their understanding were so simple and private. So it means that it's because they have not enough experience in politics for several centuries. It's only 1 century that they have some touching the politics, and about 40 cases, less than 40 cases, they have governments and the state. So as you see, they reach politics is about religion. It's not an easy answer to this question. Maybe in future you have something else such as this. Yes.
I have a question. You said toward the end of your talk that Mr. Khomeini and Mr. Montazeri, they basically changed their views and theories about democracy. I'm wondering what would have happened if in the history you could switch their places. If Montazeri was in the position that Mr. Khomeini was, and Khomeini was in the position that Montazeri was, do you think that they would keep their theories, or it's really the position that you are in that defines the theory for you?
It's not an easy question. Answer to this question, maybe yes. If we replace these 2 persons, also we should replace their theories too. Because I told you that my understanding of for several years research on this issue, all of these theories are the fruit of their time. And they also are the action and reaction of reality and theory. They're not isolated. So it's so easy for me to say, yes, they should replace their theory.
If someone else knows about that question. So my question is about, of course, we can hope for a better future and more democracy and everything, but the way that the Iranian government is set up, because it has self-protecting mechanisms built into it, just like many other countries. It's not just for Iran, it's like this. So even if you want to teach in a university, you have to declare that you believe in Velayat Mutlaq Faqih, which means that I believe that the supreme leader is the person who knows the best and it chooses the best for me, and I will do whatever they choose for me. And this is not maybe as important for people that work in the government or universities, but especially for people who get into the parliament and they are chosen by people, they should declare this kind of devotion. Although we know that there's a spectrum in how much they are devoted, but of course, because of this kind, especially for the group that are going to choose the next leader, which again, they are supposedly elected, but the election, they have to pass through all those filters, which means that they are chosen such that they can protect the system. How would you see that with democracy and with positive movements, we would be able to pass this kind of thing and get the point that there is no supreme leader. It is actually a democracy and secular nation without disruption and another coup and another, I don't know, revolution, bloodshed, or other things people don't like.
The power of the citizens are above and more than the power of the government. No, my friend asked me about the crisis. We have a lot of crisis in the family of the governments. They have problems with their children. No, their children are against their parents. I know that many of them, the father is revolutionary guard or has a, for example, this job in judiciary power or executive power or the parliament member, and all of his children, they disagree with their parents. They are supporting, for example, the Green movement, the opposition in opposition to their parents. So, and keep in your mind, 70% of Iranians are less than 30 years old. It means the future of Iran is in the hand of these young generation, that they do not agree, most of them do not agree with this regime. Because of this point, I'm so optimistic about the future. And these people, this generation push in the peaceful way is dictatorship. But we should be patient. And I think all of these things, about all of these things that I know is ready for a better future if we are patient. Yes.
So as we know, in a period of time, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and Imam Ali alayhi salam, they ruled the government. How secular were those governments?
Secularism is a modern term. We should not try to expose the modern term to pre-modern time. It's completely wrong to say, which kind of democracy do you have in the time of Prophet or in the time of Imam Ali? We can't find a respect for the public opinion. That democracy is a modern term. You should not try to find it in pre-modern time. The same as secularism. You should ask, if Prophet Muhammad attend in this time, and if Imam Ali attend in this time, what would he do? Do not say, it's a wrong question to say, if we were in the time of them, was it secularism? Was it democracy? Was it this one? Was it that? No, I do not think. I do not say. The difference between me, for example, and Abdullah Naim, he tried to say also Prophet Muhammad was secular. I do not think so. He was not a secular. And does it mean that we should not believe in secularism? No. Because prophecy is completely different from governance. If Prophet Muhammad in his time was the ruler of Medina, it was the necessity of his time. But in this time, if he would be here, what should he do? I do not say that he would do the same thing that he made in the situation of Medina. It's the correct understanding of politics. Politics is the fruit of time and place. You cannot generalize. The problem of fundamentalism is generalization of the early Islam forever. It's completely wrong. What we have in some verses of the Quran, or the tradition of the Prophet, peace be upon him, or the tradition of Imam alayhi salam, also peace be upon them, is something for their time. What should we learn from them is the method, values, not some superficial understanding of their time. We should not repeat their time. We should follow their values, their virtues. I think the virtue of Prophet was mercy. The virtue of Imam Ali was justice. We should follow these virtues. It's what we should do. But if you say no, we should generalize those situations for this time, my question is impossible. The Islamic Republic was started by this point, and you see, it was not a victory. I had some talk expanding this point about all of these comparisons between the time of Prophet and our time, and especially on the case of secularism.